Welcome to AMIcast, podcast about Amiga computers. I'm your host, Krzysztof Radzikowski, but call me Krzysztof or Radzik. Welcome everybody in AMIcast episode 2. This is episode with my guest Epsilon from Australia. So hi, how are you?
G'day, how are you?
Very nice. I'm fine. Everybody are fine. We have a little bit time difference. Yeah, in your country is plus 10 hours. In mine is minus 10, something like this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's 6
So
p.m. here, and it's over there.
yeah,
It's 8:30 or something.
yeah, 8:30, and I'm really I'm not used to do it at 8 hours 8 p.m. 8 a.m. at weekends. So I'm in quite small shock, but this is okay. This is now is very international podcast, yeah.
Absolutely.
Intercontinental. Okay, so the first question for you, the beginning is about your first computer and about your and then Amigas. How you started the IT life, let's say like this. Yeah.
Sure. In my case, basically my first machine was actually a Mattel Intellivision, which is a console from in the late 70s, which was basically competing with the Atari 2600 at the time. Got very excited when that was brought home, playing checkers and other games on it. Very basic graphics, as you can imagine, but hooked me right into computers from a very young age. I think I was only probably 4 or 5 at the time, and it basically set me on the course for computing for life, really. Following that, we moved into the Commodore world, into Commodore 64, Commodore 128. Great machines, a lot of fun. Obviously, some brilliant games around that time. I also did a little bit of programming in BASIC even on those. But ultimately, we stepped up to our first Amiga in the late 80s, which was 1988, I think, which was the Amiga 500,
Okay.
which was a 1 meg Kickstart 1.2 Amiga OCS. I think at the time, because I was a teenager, I was basically just playing games on it most of the time. Most of my friends also had Amiga 500s, and so we were doing a lot of swapping, as I think everybody did at that time.
Yeah, exactly. This is the times. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I look back at it and I think, wow, those were amazing days, weren't they? And ultimately, we upgraded that to an Amiga 2000 in 1991 with a hard disk, 52 meg hard disk.
Yeah, I know. I know. In my first Amiga, it was 60 megabytes or something like this. This is very small, but it was compared to the floppy, it was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And that particular Amiga, it was just still a standard 68,000, but it had 3 meg of RAM. I could finally run all the Eric Schwartz animations and things that I was never able to run on the 500. So that was pretty cool. And obviously from that, we upgraded. I bought lots of other computers that are non-Amiga related, of course. But there's been a steady flow of systems I've purchased since the mid-90s of various Amigas. I think I've owned pretty much all of them at one stage or another. And then ultimately also bought some next-gen hardware, SAM 440 EP in 2008, which died, unfortunately. Yeah, just dead on one day, didn't work. And then ultimately I pre-ordered and got the Amiga X1000 first contact in 2012, which is obviously my current main Amiga that I muck around with.
Okay.
So,
Just one question about the old times.
Sure.
In Australia, the Amiga was quite popular, or this was only home computer gaming machine, something like that.
Yeah, basically it was popular as a gaming machine in Australia. Not like in America where it was more application focused. In Australia, it was pretty much used for games. And basically that petered out in 1994, obviously when Commodore went bankrupt. Unlike overseas where we continue to have coverage from UK magazines and US magazines that continue to cover developments in the Amiga world, in Australia everything pretty much stopped in 1994. So I think there was some games on the PC at the time like Doom and things that basically got a lot of people moving across from Amiga to PC. Even though it was a step backwards technologically, the machines were much faster, so it couldn't really compete with those. But having said that, they were a lot of fun, and it was, for me, was kind of a sad time because I felt that the Amiga 1200 and Amiga 4000 were never really given enough opportunity to really stretch their legs and show people what they could really do, because they'd only been around for a year or so at that time. But ultimately, through the accelerators and other expansions that we saw over the mid to late 90s, we got to see the real potential of those machines, and some amazing demos that were written for the AGA systems in the late 90s and even the early 2000s. Were quite incredible to watch, and I was very pleased to follow along with those developments. The internet came along at the right time. We could follow all of this stuff online and actually continue to enjoy Amiga as a hobby even after Commodore went under.
Yeah, this is at the end of all, let's say we are still alive somehow.
True.
Okay, so now we have your history, the basic stuff, and let's jump to mine part. So the blog, because you started the blog I think few years ago. I don't remember exactly now, but in my opinion, it's very nice, and you put a lot of nice information with screenshots. So this is quite good knowledge base for everybody that use Amiga OS 4. So please talk about this a little bit, how you started, what the idea and the stuff, the idea why you started. Yeah.
Sure, of course. Obviously, when I purchased the Amiga One X1000 in 2011, actually, late 2011, I pre-ordered it. I finally received it in around May 2012. And I decided from the beginning of owning it that I wanted to capture all of the things that I learned along the way in setting up the X1000, tips and tricks, things that I learned as I did things that I would inevitably forget later because I have a habit of forgetting things. So I found that what was very useful was to have this resource of information that would basically say to me, okay, this is what I did to get things working, and capture that with screenshots and description, and in a way that would make it possible for me to do it again if the system died or the hard disk failed or something like that. I also thought that by doing that, it may be beneficial to other people who'd also received their X1000s recently and were wondering, what they could do with their system as well if they hadn't come across the same things that I had. So that was how it started originally. And over time, basically, it became bigger and bigger as more and more people were interested in it and asked me lots of questions about various applications or tools or things that they were interested in but didn't know much about. I tried to cover as much as I can, or as much as I have free time to do, regarding X1000, Amiga OS 4 initially. I also tried to set up a separate blog that would look into things like classic Amiga and other areas, but I had feedback from the community at AMI West last year that that they didn't understand why I did that. So they said that you really should just combine it all into one blog. So I decided to move that all into one blog, which is why there is just the one now, that covers both classic and next gen Amiga stuff. And although I don't focus heavily on things like MorphOS and AROS, I do talk about them. I'm also particularly focused on looking on little side projects that I do on the classic Amiga side of things, which, you know, I do from time to time just because it's a lot of fun to do. I guess you can call it a retro thing or a nostalgia trip or whatever, but, you know, mucking around with an Amiga 1000 or a CDTV or Amiga 4000 is a lot of fun to try things out. So now and again, I try little projects out and I try and capture those on the blog as well, because I found particular inspiration, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the guy's name, but there was another blog, I think it's MFilo.
MFio. Yeah, I know this.
Yeah,
I will put the link in description. I think this will be the best.
His blog on modifying classic Amiga hardware to do projects is quite inspirational. I couldn't even dream of doing DIY projects like that. I'm not a solderer, but I did enjoy following it a lot, and it did inspire me to upgrade some of my classic Amiga hardware to do more with it. And so I've tried to capture some of that in my blog as well. But as you say, the main focus, well, most of the blog entries are focused on the X1000, and that's predominantly because it's a current system that's being actively developed for. And so I think that it's good to follow current developments in the Amiga world, as well as enjoying some of the new hardware that's developed for our classic hardware as well. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, maybe now you can talk or say something more about your Amiga X1000. The maybe hardware configuration is not so interesting, but what are you doing on this, and how you feel about speed of, let's say, everyday use of internet or something? Because I was talking in podcast in Polish version with the guys that, for example, PowerPC is not very maybe nice way for us, because it will be always not fast like Intel in the future. And what do you feel about the everyday life with this Amiga? This is possible, or you have for sure you have some problems, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't expect the X1000 is going to cover all of my needs on a day-to-day basis from a system point of view, and I don't expect it to. You know, I have a MacBook Pro. I think most people know that I have one because I would have seen it when I was at AmiWest last year, and that's my main system that I use. But apart from that, I do actually do quite a surprising amount of my internet web browsing using the X1000, predominantly because the functionality is now there in browsers like Odyssey, to actually view and use the majority of things. I can check my email using, you know, Google Mail. I can use the chat functionality for obviously IM, not for video, but you know, there are things that you can definitely do with the system. What pleasantly surprises me, I suppose, coming from using the classic Amigas as well as using these systems, is just how far Amiga OS has come from those days, you know, from the 1.3 days. And you know, I spent a lot of time doing configurations for hard disk and workbench 1.3 setups on my Amiga 2000 and Amiga 500, but I don't have to do that kind of configuration on Amiga OS 4, because so much of that is set up out of the box to do what you need it to do, which is a great thing. The PowerPC processor, as you touched on, obviously, you know, that was born out of a degree of history, right? Because Amiga OS originally supported PowerPC processors from Phase 5 using the Warp OS and the other one. Can't remember the other one now.
Power Up.
Power Up. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I've never had the pleasure of owning a PowerPC accelerator on the classics. So
In classic Amiga, I can say this was only, like everybody said, co-processor, nothing more, nothing less. Some software there was, but in my Amiga 12,000, this was the best solution with Amiga OS 4 with this power PC, because in classic configuration, it's you can play I don't know 3 games and nothing is on PowerPC. So in classic Amiga, I think more sense makes the powerful Motorola, classic Motorola 68K. Yeah.
yeah, and obviously some of that history. I mean, I remember at the time in the mid '90s there was a big thing in the Amiga community about not being Intel. So we had the Intel outside stickers everywhere. We had them branded on demos and everything, saying, "Hey, we're different."
Yeah, exactly. In Poland, we have even party Intel outside. So
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, the point was at the time, I think there was a real movement in the Amiga community not to be part of the Intel bandwagon. Now, whether that was a good thing for us or not, well, I suppose history has judged us harshly there, hasn't it? But I would say that the PowerPC support that we've needed to continue, or the direction that's been taken to continue to use PowerPC, has probably come about from that history, rather than someone sitting down and going, well, you know, what is the best platform for us? But having said that, you know, I found that, I mean, Amiga OS is not a big footprint, and in terms of what it actually does, I think a PowerPC processor, certainly its speed is more than acceptable for everyday use. I mean, I wouldn't expect it to run, you know, high-end games or anything like that. But then, you know, I don't think Amigas were ever about that, to be perfectly honest with you. I think we had some stunning graphics in our games in the 80s and early 90s on the Amiga. They were brilliant, and I loved playing them. But as we moved into the 3D world, you know, there was no question that Amiga games suffered in that transition to 3D. We just, you know, the hardware just wasn't there to make it work well. And you could argue that to a lesser extent, we still have the same issues today with that, because basically we're not able to run a lot of those high-end games because we just don't have, you know, that sort of hardware support. But having said that, I don't think it's that important, because I don't think that Amigas are about being able to play modern games. I think they're about enjoying the retro and nostalgia that comes from, you know, being able to use a system that's genuinely fun to use. You know, I use a PC and Windows every day for work, and when I come home and turn on the X1000, it's a wonderful break from, you know, the everyday life that we have to do. It's just a bit of fun. I don't take it seriously. I don't expect anyone else to take it seriously. Yeah, I'm very grateful for the developments that happen on this platform. I think it's a wonderful thing for our community that we still have people that are willing to spend their spare time. And let's face it, nobody's getting rich out of developing for Amiga OS.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. This is only some guys. Whatever we talk about Amiga OS or Morpho OS or Aeros, this is only few guys that doing is.
Yeah. No one's making money out of this. You know, or they might be making a little bit, but certainly not enough to live on 100%. I think, you know, people do it because they love mucking around with Amiga systems, whether that's Morpho OS or Amiga OS or Aeros or, you know, classic Amiga, or if you're running it under emulation. You know, it's just about the fun element of it, for me anyway, and I imagine for most other people it's the same. You know, I don't have any delusions that it's going to do everything that my MacBook Pro does.
Yeah, for sure. But the one question, because before you had the SAM board, yeah, and I think this was quite slow hardware. You can compare it somehow to your new Amiga.
Oh yeah, no question. I mean, I understand why people buy the same system. It's sort of in the middle as far as pricing goes. So it's more attractive because the pricing's much, you know, the entry level, I guess, is much lower than an X1000. But I can say that, it's night and day. The difference in performance between the systems is, I wouldn't swap the X1000 back for a SAM, that's for sure. But I understand why people can't invest that kind of money. But when people criticize the cost of it, they have to remember that it's developed for a very small market, and it's funding the part of the cost of it is funding the developers of Amiga OS 4 as well. It's the ongoing features and the new applications and everything else that we continue to receive for this hardware. Part of the cost of the hardware goes towards helping with that. I don't see it as that. And the other thing that I also would say to that point as well, and I do understand people's thing about the cost of it. I mean, yes, you can go out and buy a PC; it's much cheaper than buying one of these, but you're not buying it for that reason, right? I'm not buying it to be a PC replacement. The original Amigas, the Amiga 4000 and the Amiga 3000, and the equivalent models to what an X1000 is today, cost the same sort of money.
Yeah, what I can say, for in my opinion, the problem of the high cost of the X1000 is the mainly, I think, PowerPC processor and development, of course. But when when it will be used Intel, it will be for sure cheaper. But we can forget it. And when I see now the price on eBay or something like this of the very nice Amiga 4000 with PowerPC, etc.,
scary.
This is scary. Maybe in this situation, maybe it's better to buy X1000 and run everything, the old games through the UAE, because the prices in this situation I think is even lower. Because 4000 is going very even Blizzard PowerPC is going very high now. Every month is new price.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, I would love to have a PowerPC processor in my 4000 again, but it's just the cost is ridiculous. I understand it's a collectible thing now, and the X1000 will be collectible too one day. I mean, all of these systems, they have a small run, and I think if people want to have a high-end Amiga OS system, the X1000 is the system to have right now. I know that there are, obviously the X5000 is in development as well, and that's going to come at some point in the future, and that provides an upgrade path. And I think we should be looking at it like that as well. We have a situation that we didn't have for a long time in the 2000s, where we had all that uncertainty. We had no hardware manufacturing. We had an Amiga OS that was under development but wasn't released. It was a terrible time. We had very little software on the classic Amiga front because it had all petered off by that stage, but we didn't have anything to replace it either. And it was only after we started getting that hardware finally coming out, and obviously MorphOS being released for more commonly available hardware like the Apple PowerBooks and so on, that enabled people to actually get to grips with these next generation Amiga OSs that were being developed over that period, and that a lot of us never got the opportunity to muck around with until then. I think they're all targeting different markets, very different. And that's not a bad thing. I think the PowerPC processor path, I agree to a certain extent, is a challenge for Amiga OS and for MorphOS, because I think that ultimately, if we look at MorphOS, for example, it's on a very cheap hardware platform, right? So the attraction of buying it is because the hardware is cheap, it's off the shelf, people can buy it, and it costs very little money. But the problem is that's today, right? But in 5 or 6 years' time, when that hardware stops being easy to get and starts becoming collectible, the same as the old Macintoshes are now becoming collectible as well, it will become more and more expensive to be able to buy it. And of course, PowerPC, PowerBooks as they're getting older, obviously you're going to have more reliability problems. Laptops traditionally have more problems anyway when they get older. So I think there's going to be a challenge for MorphOS coming up in a few years' time if they don't have a platform or another targeted hardware platform to run it on, which would be. I'm interested to see what they do with that actually.
Well, maybe they will port it for some. I heard something like this that can be Morpheus can be ported for some, because this can be the new, let's say, Pegasus for everybody. You can use the all systems. No, well, more or less all Amiga OS 4, MorphOS, and maybe Aeros too. But what I want to say, this is, in my opinion, you have a lot of right here, because from the 2010, our situation in community of Amiga, it's better, because now we get the expensive but new hardware, and the development is moving somehow. It's maybe not very fast, but it's doing, the guys are doing something. So it's much better conditions that was in let's say in days of ESCOM or Amiga technologies or this stuff, because there was only talking and nothing was
Yes,
happening.
exactly right. Exactly right. And that's
So
that's the point I'm making, is that, the situation development may not be as fast as we would all like it to be, but there is some commercial realities to deal with as well. In remembering that Amiga is not a mainstream system, it's not a mainstream OS, and the developers that are working on it are doing it in their spare time. So the development cycle necessarily fits into their patterns. So, I mean, from my perspective, as an X1000 owner, I want new software every day, please. I mean, that would be wonderful. I'd love to be able to blog every day about some other new piece of software that's been released. That would be a wonderful thing. But I'm also aware that any improvement in our current size of our community is based on not trying to get new people into the market, because I don't think that's what we're looking at. I think realistically we're trying to get ex-Amigans who are nostalgic about it to get back into the market, and trying to get those people to upgrade and look at next generation OSs, as well as just mucking around with the old stuff. So if you give them a viable system that can allow them to play all their old stuff that they obviously want to get back into the Amiga to muck around with, but can also try out the new and latest stuff, whether that's MorphOS or Amiga OS or Aeros or whatever the tape may be, I think it's a very positive thing if we can improve the size of the community by getting some of those ex-Amigans back in. We lost a lot of them in the late 90s
2000s,
and early
no.
2000s because there was so little happening in the marketplace as far as new hardware and the development of the operating system. So it would be nice to be able to entice some of them back, but a lot of that has to do with showing, tangible systems that people can go out and buy, and that are actually, offer a real, I guess, experience for the ex-Amiga person to really enjoy. I think that the current trend that Amistore is doing, where they're taking or buying up rights to classic Amiga applications and then porting them into Amiga OS 4 native code, is a step in that way, because it basically says we'll take all these applications people know how to use from the Amiga and the classic Amiga days, and we'll make it bang up to date so that you can run it on the new Amiga OS software. But we can also then extend its functionality to incorporate features that are implemented in other solutions. Because at the end of the day, nobody's expecting Amiga OS to run MS Word or,
Yeah, and yeah, we will get the LibreOffice, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's an ongoing process as well. I know we're doing some porting work. Well, not me, but obviously there are people doing porting work of Linux applications onto Amiga OS, and not just Amiga OS. I think MorphOS is getting some of that sort of stuff too. But I think that is a good thing overall, because anything that builds the amount of software and the capabilities of the OS is a good thing. If we're able to shortcut some of the development time by doing porting, then that's probably a healthy thing as well. But I think it's a combination of having new software that is genuine Amiga software, right? Not ported from other platforms, and some of the ported stuff that people are familiar with, right? In the modern systems that they use today. So, and that will help make the system more appealing to people. I took the X1000 to an Adelaide Amiga gathering in January this year. And the response to the system was quite amazing. I was surprised. I think part of the problem with that X1000 is because people don't get to see the thing. So they don't realize just how well it works. I had a couple of people that were logged into Dropbox through Odyssey on my X1000, downloading documents to show other people in the hall, some brochures and other things that they wanted to show. And, they didn't realize that you could do that on Amiga OS. And I think,
because the guys are stuck with retro stuff now.
That's right. And retro is fine. And while I was there, I showed them, yes, you can run UAE, you can run all of these, all the old games. I fired up Indianapolis 500. Wow, I'd realized how horrible that game is.
This is the
I was surprised. I had fond memories of that game, but when I fired it back up, I thought, wow, this is really awful. So it just goes to show, some games age really well and other ones don't. And what I've generally found is 3D games don't age well. But the old 2D retro games generally do age well because they don't really, they never became any blockier or, nicer looking in the newer incarnations. It's not massively different. But the 3D games changed a lot from the mid-90s through to today.
Now we have everything in 3D, and this is, I think, even too much because we need some nice 2D games. And
yes, and that's
you
why
do everything in 3D.
Yeah. That's why the mobile market's taken off so well, because you've got the old school bedroom coders who are out there using Xcode and other development tools on modern systems to create very basic 2D interactive games. Some of them I loosely call games, but anyway. But they basically are getting a lot of people to buy these games, even though they're not the latest fancy 3D whatever. And it basically sends the message to the market that people don't need that anymore. I don't think that a development team spending 3 or 4 years or 5 years or more developing a 3D game is time well spent. Basically because the market for those is diminishing rapidly, because the people who are buying games, the young people that are buying games, are not buying games on systems that can run those things. Someone who's a teenager today sure as hell can't afford the kind of system that would be needed to run one of these latest 3D monsters games, right? They just got no hope of being able to run those. So they turn to their Android device or their iPhone or whatever their favorite smartphone is, and they download apps from that because they're cheap. The development costs for people to make them are much lower because the number of people are less, the development cycles are less. And it's part of the thing that also applies to Amiga OS too, and MorphOS for that matter, is the development of applications is being done by a few individuals, and that can still work as it does for the mobile market. You just have to target the right kinds of games and the right kinds of applications to get people interested in buying them. I think that's Amistore's challenge, and Aeon's challenge is, how do we engage developers in a way that means that we can have a consistent flow of new games or new applications that keep people interested in the platform and keep them coming back to try new things.
Exactly. So I want to ask something because you're talking a lot.
Sorry, my apologies.
Very nice, but
I do.
my plan was to, about ask you about the old school software bringing to Amiga OS 4, like ImageFX, of course. But I think the whole story, AmiStore, is very nice because I compare it to, let's say, Apple World, yeah, the iTunes and this stuff, and at the end of all, it's easy, nice to use because you have everything in one place. And in my opinion, it's nice direction for us or for Amiga OS. And the one question about developing, because for example, Amistor was written or made or made in Hollywood, and some guys are complaining that Hollywood is making the let's say slow code or something like this. In my opinion, it's nice. Maybe I never use it. I must try buy it and then use it, but no time. But maybe this is nice tool for new guys to do something, because now in Amiga OS, or rather Amiga systems, now we are not in good situation with software. There is not so much software. There something happens, but it could be something like creator for games, easy games, point and click games or applications. Yeah, what do you think about this?
Absolutely, and that was, I guess, the point I was touching on just before. I think that the development of simpler 2D or simpler 3D games, and I know that Intwickler X is doing a lot of that sort of work at the moment, obviously,
Yeah,
with their games, and I think it sets a benchmark that says, hey, you don't have to spend years and years and years to develop a title. In order for it to be successful. I mean, successful in the Amiga world is a little bit, you know, yeah, we
yeah.
say, oh, we sold a couple of hundred of those, so that's a successful sale. But, the reality of it is the Amiga market is quite small. So necessarily the developers are focusing their energy between mobile game platform, which is what Intwickler X does as well, right? I mean, they're making those same games for Apple iOS as well.
Exactly. And with Hollywood, you can theoretically, I
Yeah.
don't know, I will do the program or the game for Amiga and for Windows, because this is going from the one,
Yes.
yeah, this
Yeah.
development.
Yeah. The reality of it is, and I understand the programmer's point of view on this, that they would prefer to bang the hardware and do it all as efficiently and whatever as possible. But from a user's perspective, as long as it runs well, we don't care how it's done,
Yeah,
to be
true.
honest.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
I mean, AmiStore, it could be written more effectively if it was written in C or something. I don't know. Maybe it is. But at the end of the day, it does what it needs to do, right? I fire it up. It's got the applications in it. I can purchase them. I can download them and install them and run them and get updates. Um, and that's what it's for.
exactly.
And that's what that's what the Apple App Store is about. It's what Android's Play Store is about. They're all doing the same thing. It's about making content delivery easier for users so that they can search and find it easier. I know my own opinion on this from a few years ago when I first got the X1000, and finding information about particular applications was challenging because you would have to go through a number of forums and searching through things to try and work out how things work, which was one of the many reasons why I was capturing all that information on the blog, is so that it wasn't so hard to find it later.
Yeah, true. Because on your blog, you can find the nice, interesting stuff. Because when you go to OS 4 depot, this is a lot of files. Most of the files is nothing interesting, to be honest. So it's hard to find something very interesting or very useful. And using your blog, it's easy. Yeah, I configure. This was the program AFTP. Yeah,
Yes.
AFTP to. Yeah, this is without your blog. Probably I will never find it in OS Depot. Yeah,
It's a great.
in my opinion.
It actually surprised me. Actually, that software. It works really well, and being able to use it to do mass transfers of data from my Mac to it is very convenient. It saves me having to deal with USB disks and all this other stuff. So there's a lot of software out there that is being developed, and some of it isn't getting the attention that it should get, probably. To be honest, I think the developers are not, because it is a part-time thing for them, they're not focused on how do I market this, how do I get people to download it and actually use it. And that's where something like AmiStore really comes into its own, because it basically says, I will promote your stuff for you, right? And I will give you a small amount of money, so that I can try it out. And I of course, it's not perfect. None of this stuff is perfect. I think it would be great if, there were demos of everything to be able to try it out. I think that's something that we need to work on. But, it's a bit like with the app stores that we use in the Apple world as well, where you can download a free version of it and then, pay to upgrade it. I think that sort of model will work well for people where they can sample a level or something and then they have to pay to get the rest of it. That model's been in place a long time. It was used in the 90s as well, when you bought your Wolfenstein 3D for PC and you got a demo version of it with, for free, that had, a couple of levels included. And then if you wanted the rest, you had to pay for it.
Yep. No, but this is, let's say, Apple Store is working in, or App Store is working like this without demo. But still, you can download demo from the developer site. But we can leave it. I have other questions about our Amiga life, because I think at the end of all, the whatever Amiga NG is quite usable in every day, but in my opinion, for example, we are lack of Dropbox, because I'm using a lot of Dropbox, and when you are using Macs or other stuff without Dropbox, only through the web page, it's not so comfortable. So I hope in future the Dropbox somehow will come to the Amiga. But what do you think about Timberwolf or something like this? Because, as like you said, we need the native application and we need quite some ports. And for example, in a web browser live in Amiga, it's not, in my opinion, it's not so nice, because Odyssey is quite old now. I think 1 year or 2 year, and the internet is going very fast. And Timberwolf is 3 years old, and I don't know if we get new version. And what about this? Maybe, for example, we should have some, but I don't know how to do it, because there are a lot of fights between the blue camp, red camp, to have the one team that, for example, developing Odyssey and porting for every system, that we get updated browser every half year, let's say, like this.
I think certainly there is a splitting out of development effort across multiple browsers. I think, given the size of the community, I think it would make more sense to focus on one of them. But I mean, obviously there's reasons for that around the original developers of each one, and they don't necessarily want to get involved in a joint effort. But looking at where we are today, and actually, as I was mentioning to you before we started this, I'm spending a lot of time this weekend actually looking at different web browsers on Amiga OS 4 on the X1000, and noticing, obviously there's some good features in each one that the others should have, and we're not able to get them all to work together, which is unfortunate, because I think we're missing out on features because we're not able to get one browser that does everything, rather than having development effort split. But having said all of that, the effort to port Firefox across as Timberwolf was admirable. I think I understand the reasoning behind why they would do that. I guess the disappointing part of it is that it hasn't been updated. and obviously the version of Firefox that it's based on is quite an old version now. And I think, well, I'm not sure exactly what version of Firefox we're up to at the moment, but I think it's like 36 or something ridiculous.
Yeah, the Firefox with numbers is.
I lost track of the version numbers. They get so difficult to actually keep on top of. It's 35. Sorry, I was close though.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, it's version 35 at the moment. But our version's based on version 4. So, it gives you some idea just how much development's occurred in the last 3 years in Firefox. And we're obviously not getting the benefit of any of that because we're not seeing any of the updates. But having said that, it has shown that we can have a HTML compliant web browser on the Amiga OS, and getting an updated port of Odyssey that provided us that functionality was also a good thing. Having the TLS support and the things like that have basically enabled us to do a lot more with the web browser. Now, it's not perfect, yes, that's true. But what I can say is that the effort that has been done, particularly, and I suppose we should thank Steve Jobs for this, is because he basically put his foot down about including Adobe Flash in browsers on iPhones and iPads, has forced the marketplace to change the way that it does web coding and basically force them to use HTML5 compliant web pages. And that's enabled us to reap the benefit of that from the browsers that now support that, because we would not get Adobe Flash or Acrobat Reader or any of these other commercial programs that we don't have an Amiga version of and will never have an Amiga version of. This has given us a way out of that situation. We're able to enjoy web browsing. I mean, I can watch YouTube on my X1000. It's fantastic. I can watch Vimeo on my X1000, and that's fantastic. I can check my Google Mail on there. I can use Dropbox to upload and download on it. Okay, I don't have a dedicated client, but how many platforms outside of the main platforms actually have one?
Yeah, true.
So,
but maybe with Dropbox, I am thinking about this too. Maybe the solution is the hard. This is the NAS system. I think that your hard drive is connected to your router, and then the router have access to the Dropbox, and you can connect it with Amiga through the Samba or something like this. So maybe this is the solution.
possibly.
But maybe I will try someday this, but at the end of all, it will be nice to have some killings apps like Firefox or old school Image FX, and I hope this will. We'll see what happened with this good stuff. I think this is nice that they are. The Aeon is buying something, but the question is how will be development, because like we talk, the developers, the users or the community is small, and the developers, it's only 1 or 2% of the normal guys. Yeah,
that's right. But that's as I was saying, what they're trying to do, and I spoke quite a lot with Trevor and Matt and stuff at AmiWest last year, is to provide that content, right, and the ongoing applications and things that are needed to keep people engaged and wanting to be part of the Amiga community still. And part of that is, rewarding developers for their work in their spare time, and that's the concept of using an Ami store to do. Is basically to say to these people, well, you don't have the free time to market these products to the Amiga community, so we'll do it, and we'll sell your product for you, and you'll make some money out of it, which will hopefully help fund some more development in the future. And I think that's an encouraging way to go about it. It is ultimately how successful that is really does is decided by the end users, is by everybody out there in the community. If you want that development to continue on the Amiga OS 4, and you want to continue to muck around with it, then we need to support these developers when they make product that we want. And I'm not saying that you have to buy products you don't want, because I'm not saying that. You know, I don't think anybody should be buying stuff that they, aren't ever going to use. But I think that if it fills the need, or you think that it will be fun to muck around with for a while, and that's what Amigas are all about, in my opinion, then you know, go and buy it. Support the developers.
Yeah, true. Because whatever we talk or everybody will say, I think the Trevor and the let's say the Amiga OS4 guys have some idea. They bring the expensive but the new hardware. They are giving the software for this, and now with the Ami store, they are trying to build some environment for this. Yeah. So
Yes.
this is now, and now I will ask you about Ami West. Maybe you can
Sure.
say to us about this more, because you were there and you met the guys. For one thing that I saw the picture on your blog, and I'm a little bit afraid that we are old guys. But there is no new blood when we die. The computer will die. But beside of that, your opinion about this party, and maybe you can say something to us about the new X5000. You saw this for sure. Yeah.
Yes, I did. And what I can say, yes, in America, the Amiga fan base is in general older than it was in Europe, and in Australia too, for that matter. I think when I went to the Adelaide Amiga group meeting here in January, nearly everybody that was in there was around my age or a little bit older. They were either involved in selling Amiga systems, in which case they were considerably older than me, or they were customers, and most of us were around the same age when we got into Amigas in the 80s. So we're all in our late 30s or early 40s, I would imagine, in this part of the world anyway. And I suppose over in Europe it's probably not hugely different. Although, having said that, I have met some people that are genuine new Amiga users, who haven't actually used one before. And when they did, they went straight into using next gen Amiga systems because they didn't have that legacy. Right? They didn't have that that same interest in retro, and you can actually see that as well with some of the ongoing developers that I've seen who are only interested in the next gen stuff. Right? They want to be able to push the platform forward however they can do it. But in any case, back to Ami West. The obviously I went there for the first time last year. It was a fantastic experience. I'd always wanted to go. I just never thought I'd have the money. Because coming from Australia, it's an extremely long trip.
Yeah, the flight is this how much hours?
I think it's around 24 to 26 hours.
Oh fuck.
Yeah.
So now I must put explicit. Oh,
Yeah,
fuck,
you'll have
no.
to beep that. But yeah, it's a long. Basically, we do a leg from. I live in Adelaide in South Australia. We fly across to Sydney, which is 2.5 hours, and then we stay there for a few hours, and then we fly 16 or 17 hours over to LA, and then another 3 or 4 hours waiting there, and then another flight from there to Sacramento in this case.
Oh, amazing.
So it was a long flight, and by the time you get there, you're pretty exhausted, and the time zone difference certainly affects you as well. Going over is not so bad because we actually gain a day going over. We lose a day coming back. So when I leave here, I actually arrive in LA at about an hour before I left, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, this is always like this. This is what the time is.
Yeah, you've still got a full day ahead of you, and you've been awake.
Yeah,
all that
and
time.
you are completely dead man. Yeah,
Exactly. So it was pretty hard, but I arrived at the venue, and I met quite a few of the guys actually at the reception, just checking in, and dumped my stuff off in my room, went straight into the venue and started helping them assemble it. The actual fixtures and things that are needed for the show. It's such a community effort. Everybody in there was pitching in. You had Stephen Solly sitting there helping with that as well. where Brian and all the other guys that are in there setting up, everyone was pitching in. I really liked that about the show, because it wasn't about, these people are too high and so they won't do anything. It was everybody was helping. And that was a wonderful thing about it. I was very pleased to see so many Amigas in one place.
Nowadays
it's such a rare thing.
Strange.
You just don't get to see it very often. And to have so many next-gen Amiga stuff, I was determined coming over there that it was going to be about all of the Amiga platforms, because I've followed the history of AmiWest, and I understand that it's not very often that the other platforms get much of a look in over there, and that's mainly because they don't go. It's there's a perception that it's an Amiga OS 4 show only, but it's not. It's for everybody, and the reality is that it's mainly Amiga OS 4 people that are attending it, and that's why it ends up being like that. But what I noticed when I was over there, there's a large chunk of the people that were going that are classic Amiga only, and they were only interested in that. And that's why you had the huge bank of classic Amigas all set up there, covering the entire history of the Amiga. And those people, they're not interested in the other platforms. They're interested in the classic side, and that's fine. And then you've got, obviously, Hyperion Entertainment were there with Stephen Solly and a few others, and a lot of the beta testers and developers are all there as well, showing off their SAM systems or their X1000s, and in Bill Basari, or Tech Major's case, the X5000, which he had on display. It was quite amazing to actually see that hardware running for the first time, because I'd never seen it obviously prior to AmiWest. It's still being developed. Obviously, it's not ready for release yet, but it looks quite interesting as an upgrade path from an X1000. I think that there's a lot of potential there. The actual system itself is quite reliable from what I saw at the show. Seemed to work reasonably well. I mean, considering that Amiga OS 4 had only just been ported to it at that stage, there was still a lot of work to do on it. They were able to run the 3D demonstrations on it to show it off, which were quite amazing to see. The other thing that I noticed was really nice with the X5000 was the early start menu that they've added.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this, the Amiga Classics option, yeah?
Yeah, I asked about that too. I didn't get an answer either.
Sorry.
I got told it would be a surprise, and they never did tell us what the surprise was, so sorry, but I can't enlighten you what the classic Amiga option is.
Yeah, but maybe this can be nice combination. I think this will be like you can start the OS4 and the classic under somehow emulation.
Yeah,
and this could be the.
I think
exactly.
I think that would be a good situation where you could basically say to the classic Amiga fans, "Hey, here's a platform you can run all your old classic Amiga stuff if you want to. You never have to touch Amiga OS 4 if you don't want to. But if you want to, you have the option.
You can.
Yeah, you can.
And one thing about this computer, this tower, the red white, this is the. Do you know this is the temporary, or this will come to the market like that?
Yeah, I don't think it will come to the market like that. That was actually Bill's case. So he basically hand sprayed that the Boing Ball logo that was on the side and all that. It was all done by them. So I don't think it will look like that when it's released. But it will be interesting to see what it does actually look like. It would be nice to actually see a departure from the X1000 colors and go with something a little bit different. Just simply to separate it from that system.
And this hardware, the new Amiga X5000 will be cheaper, yeah, probably. So we'll see.
We'll see. I have no idea if it really will be or not, but they're saying it will be, and I think that would be very helpful if it was, because obviously, some people have mentioned about the price of the X1000 being too high.
I think the
I don't
something
agree. I don't agree with that, but
yeah.
as I said, its pricing to Amiga 3000 and Amiga 4000 is not hugely different. So
Yeah, true.
yeah,
But it will be nice when you have the, for example, X5000, the basic model for something about $2,000, not $3,000. Yeah,
I,
2000 is much more. It comes more close to your head that 3,000. 3,000 is a lot of money at the end of all. Yeah.
yeah, I think if they have, if they do actually implement that classic Amiga option and they have the Amiga OS 4 option on the platform, so that the user can decide what they want, right? So they might say, okay, I want to run classic Amiga only, and they buy the system in that configuration, but they can update it later on if they want to run Amiga OS 4, and that would make the hardware cheaper as well because they're not having to buy that license. But there's definitely. I mean, if that happens, I don't know if that's what their plans are. But if it is, then that would be a good idea, I think, because it would enable them to sell the system a little bit cheaper. I'd love the idea personally of running classic Amiga platform, but using something like AmiKit or whatever to really provide a zooped up version of it, so that people get the very best classic experience on it.
Yeah. One question about this Amiga and your Amiga. You will change your Amiga, jump to the new model, or just stay with X1000?
Um, I don't know. I'm interested to see what it ultimately ends up being. I guess when the X5000 comes out, I think that it's a very clear upgrade path for people who are using a SAM system. Because there's a very clear benefit, and because the X1000 is, I mean, they obviously have a certain supply of them left, but I mean, once that runs out, they're not going to have any more of them, I'd imagine. So the X5000 will be the system at that point. It will provide the high-end system alternative to SAM users, but with a lower price point, it should be attractive to everybody, really. I mean, I think the X1000 owners will certainly be looking at interest to see what they can get with it that they can't get with their current platform. I know that the X5000 has taken away the CFE BIOS to go back to the old U-boot BIOS that was in the SAMs. Personally, I think that's a good thing because I've used CFE and yeah, I think it's good to go back. To be honest, I mean, CFE is okay. It's not very user friendly, and I spoke to a fellow X1000 owner at the Adelaide Gathering on January, and he was afraid to touch it. To do the firmware upgrade because the steps are quite involved for a non-technical person. So we don't have the option in Australia to ship the system back to Amiga Kit to get it, flat sent back to you. It's not.
It's not so easy.
It's not. I mean, I'm doing lots of little projects on the side, and one of the things I was doing is with the Amiga 1000, the original classic. Been doing a lot with that on the blog recently, and people can follow up with that. But yeah, I bought a Indivision ECS converter for it, so I could run scan doubler for the output of the video from it. And it's arrived broken, and unfortunately, it will cost me more to send it back than it costs to buy it. And that's the frustration with getting repairs done. You got to look at the cost of that and go, well,
You must move to Europe now.
I might have to. But it's the nature of it. But I love living in Australia, so I wouldn't change it.
This I will ask you privately about this, maybe not online. What I want to ask about now, it will be the emulation, because on the AmiWest you had your MacBook with Amiga OS 4. Thanks to the optional emulation of PowerPC processor. What do you think about this, because I think the Amiga OS 4.1, this final edition, get more users because of cheap hardware. Yeah, I will say like this. So this is the, I think, smart move. What do you think about this? And if you are using this OS 4 on Mac,
Yes, I am.
not every day, but sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes. And obviously, in the case of AMI West, the need to run it was actually because it was not possible for me to bring the X1000 to the show. So I needed to get it working under emulation so that I could use it, because I went to the programming seminar as well. And there was no way I could get any benefit from that if I couldn't actually program in an Amiga OS 4 environment, because that was what it was being done in, of course. So it was imperative for me to get a working emulation of Amiga OS 4.1 working on my Mac. So I got all that working, but a lot has changed actually in that emulation since I did it, even for a positive, basically, because it means that now we have more support and faster emulation, being able to use other hard disk formats, being able to use the file systems, like SFS and things like that, to get better speed from the hard disk, allowing faster boots and all that sort of thing. The support for other graphics, for Picasso 4, obviously being able to do networking, and now they've got the Takata sound card support too, which is all very exciting. So I'm trying at the moment, well, not trying, I am setting up FS-UAE on Mac OS 10. Last year at AMI West, I actually demonstrated the emulation under WinUAE on Windows 7 on the MacBook Pro, but I also had FS-UAE configured with it as well on the Mac side. But in the 30 minutes that I was given to demonstrate it, I didn't have time to show both, so I just showed the PC side of it.
One thing, one tip, because I'm using WinUAE with crossover. It's working very nice, so you can try on Mac it.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I'm now using FS-UAE to run the latest Final Edition Classic on it, and I'm still early days because I've only just put it on, and you would have seen that on the blog the other week, and I'm still getting things working on it, but I think it shows a lot of potential. The updates on WinUAE since version 3, which are now being ported across as functionality in FS-UAE, enables us to do pretty much the same things on the Mac side as on the Windows side, which is great because it opens up the door for more people to run it. And to be honest, it's a great way in for people who want to try out Amiga OS 4.1 Final Edition. It's very cheap. It's whatever it is, €30 or whatever. And the emulation itself doesn't cost you anything. You just install it, right? And from that point of view, it's a very attractive platform for people to get in and try out Amiga OS 4 without having to spend a lot of money on hardware, to find out, is this something that I'm interested in, or do I just want to stay classic Amiga, right? And that's fine. I mean, I don't have an issue with that. If people want to stay classic Amiga, that's fine, and I enjoy it too. So, either or is fine. But I think the problem with these systems, I guess, is because of the cost of buying an X1000 or a SAM system for that matter.
Yeah, the main problem of Amiga NG's Amiga OS NG, because not MorphOS, is the price. The SAM it's possible to buy because it's expensive, but you buy the Max for €1,000 or something. It's manageable, but €3,000, believe me, even in Germany, and everybody thinks that the Germans are very rich. This is not so easy.
No,
so,
I would agree with that. I think the pricing is challenging for people. Not everybody can afford to buy it. I understand that. And the emulation provides a way for people to try it out for themselves and decide if it is actually worth saving up their pennies for it or not. So
The one problem of emulation now is the fast RAM. Yeah, it's only
Yes.
128 in
Yes.
4000. Yeah,
I
so
agree.
this is really yeah.
Yeah.
But now comes the other question, because about this development of emulation, and about future of Amiga NGs. Maybe for us future in few years could be the very powerful PC, the Intel processor, and then run the emulation, and then you can run the OS4 not natively on the emulation. But you know, the Intel processor are getting faster. Maybe nowadays not so, but are faster. So you can use the brutal force. Yeah.
Well, they're just throwing more cores at it, actually. But yeah, um, uh, yeah. I mean, I don't think each individual core is hugely faster. I think they're just stacking more of them onto it.
Okay.
But that's why the multi-processor support discussion is so vibrant, right? Because people are saying, well, if we need to have this multi-processor support to get additional speed out of the Amiga. Maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. I don't personally, I don't think the Amiga is particularly slow. I think it would be slow if you were using it for running high-end 3D games, but we don't have any, so I don't think it's a big problem.
Yeah, I think Quake 3 is quite old. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually interested by that, because I know they demonstrated that at AMI West, and I was thinking that there's not much reason to do that, because it's not. Yeah, okay, it can run it. Yep.
Yeah, but nobody cares. Yeah.
But I mean, it's 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. So I mean,
I think 20. No, 10.
no, it's not 20.
It's 10.
It's not 20. But
okay.
it's
the first
yeah,
version.
I think it's around 99, 2000, isn't it? So that makes it about 15 years old now. But it's not. I don't think it's relevant. I don't think that you're going to attract any more Amiga users to the platform by showing them that it runs well. But that runs well. I think they'd be more interested in seeing modern things running well on it. That
like
application
Hollywood, for
based,
example.
or and that's what I was saying before about the whole mobile gaming thing, and porting or having those applications working on Amiga side as well as on the mobile platforms is a good way forward, because it allows people to play modern games or use modern applications. And I think that's much more attractive to people than being able to run the latest 3D game, because the majority of the market that is attracted to Amiga is not buying it to play 3D games on.
Yeah, you can do it on.
I got a
on
PS4
console,
or a PS3 or Xbox One or whatever your favorite gaming platform is going to do it better and cheaper. There's no way that you can compete with that. So why bother? Make the offering unique, make it interesting for Amiga people to want to play with it, and that means Amiga applications that are extended to do new features, or adding new capabilities to the Amiga that it didn't have before, like being able to do things like Office products, or extended graphics functionality through things like image effects, or through personal paints, or whatever the application may be. There's a lot of opportunity to take a classic Amiga application, develop it, and get Amiga people interested in it. But as I was saying before, don't expect to get anybody else interested in it, because I don't think that's reality, to be honest.
So the question. Let's say that I'm the new guy. So what do you can suggest me? How I should start it, with emulation then, or with classic Amiga, or just go by the new NG system?
Well, if you've never ever used Amiga before, then I would strongly suggest that they use a next-gen Amiga system, because that's where the active development is. Whether you want to look at MorphOS or AROS or Amiga OS, or a combination, because Amiga OS 4.1 can be done through emulation now, and the MorphOS has got a very cheap entry point on Apple and AROS can be run on, well, they say all PCs, but we'll just say a set of PCs.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's not expensive to try those out. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and they can make a decision about whether or not they're interested in it from those. And it's like any hobby, isn't it? When you first get into it, you try this, that, you try a bit of everything, and then you decide which thing you think is best. And I'm a big fan of trains. I love riding trains. But and I run a blog for that too.
I saw something. Yeah, I saw something.
But when I started doing that, I didn't know what part of that I would find most interesting. So you just have to try it. I went to Model Railway Show, or I went to ride trains here, there, and everywhere, and I found that riding them was the thing I enjoyed the most. And I think with trying out Amiga stuff, it's much the same. You're trying a Morpho OS, you might like this part about the OS, or you like this application, or you like the way this works. For me, I'm a huge fan of the old Amiga music formats, right? I come from, in the past, I was in the demo scene, working as a musician and demo designer for The Experience, which was a local group I set up here in Adelaide in the late 90s. Basically doing demos for AGA Amiga 1200 030 systems. And
one question: the demo scene in Australia was quite big, or not? Because in Europe was very popular.
It was never that big, and we had a couple of groups here that were quite popular. There were a couple of Amiga groups too, but it was fairly, there wasn't a huge number of groups in Australia, but it was fun. And we were lucky enough to get one of our demos over to Remedy 1998, and we finished 4th. I'd like to say that was a really wonderful achievement until you realise there were only 4 in the competition. But we'll just say yes, I finished 4th. We did. I used to do a lot of demo tracking in Pro Tracker on the Amiga, and then using Impulse Tracker later on the PC. So I'm a big fan of music, and I have a lot of old music for the Amiga, particularly the custom formats and things like that. And one of my hobbies, one of the things I love doing is playing those old tunes. Not the games so much. I don't, but I like listening to the music, because that's what it's that ping of nostalgia that reminds you of that time. And thanks to
nowadays you doing something. Have you tried the DigiBooster, for example?
I've got DigiBooster on X1000. It runs well. There were some things that were missing from it. I said to the guy who developed it, and he's actually incorporated some of those into his fixed version, which was the ability to import modules, because I had a lot of modules that I wanted to be able to take instruments from to use in new compositions. So, in essence, at the moment, I'm sort of not sure which way I'm going to go. I have DigiBooster over here, and on the Mac I have Renoise, which is an amazing tracker, by the way. And basically a modern tracker. I would love to have that on X1000 if anybody's keen to port it.
Yeah, guys, go to work.
Yeah, please do. But in the meantime, I've certainly given DigiBooster a bit of a run, and just see whether it can do what I want it to do. But I don't have as much time to do music composition these days, because most of it's spent writing a blog when I'm when I'm not mucking around with Amigas directly.
But maybe we can put in this episode something from your modules, or if you have something, you can send to me, and I can put it 1 or 2 songs.
Sure, no problem.
Well, this will be a nice touch. other thing that in this year we will get the 30 years old Amiga, and for now the two meetings will come. I think one in Europe and one in USA. Yeah.
Yes.
So, what do you think about this?
Oh, I think it's wonderful. You know, isn't it amazing that we're at 30 years and we still have active Amiga development? Who would have thought? You know, I look back at it every time I write a blog post about some new piece of software or a new development on our systems. I always think it's amazing that we're still doing this 30 years down the line. And here we are. It's actually 30 years since the Amiga 1000 was originally released. So I know that the guys at AmiWest were very keen to be involved in this, and there's a lot of guys there that have been putting together a Kickstarter to raise funds to really bring that show to life, because they're basically organizing a show in California in July this year. So they have a website, I think it's called amiga30.com, which you can actually go and have a look at the details of the actual event. And you can pledge some support through Kickstarter as well. And one of the more interesting things about that, I suppose, is that they're also doing some great memorabilia as part of that. So some T-shirts and posters and things like that, which would be quite something nice to have, even if you're not able to go to the show itself. You know, I don't know if they're doing something similar in Europe, but I think it's wonderful that you know, people are so keen to celebrate the history of the Amiga and actually go there, and I know, I mean, they've got some amazing people going to these events as well, right, from the original Amiga days. So I think
it could be a nice time to meet the guys to talk about our future, if we have something.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't put it like that. I would say, you know, this is what we've been able to do in the last however many years, since 1985. I mean, if you fire up an Amiga 1000, which I can do right here because I have it sitting here, and compare it to the X1000 today, you know, there's so much difference in what you can do. So you certainly couldn't say that there's been no change at all. There's been a lot of change, and you know, we all want it to be faster, but that's all because we enjoy Amiga, isn't it? So yeah, we all want it to be faster. But I'm happy that it's moving at any pace is good, and we just keep getting new stuff coming through. So, but in all means, the fact that the shows are happening this year is great, and I really hope that people get behind them and go and visit them if they can, and if they can't, then support them financially through getting some memorabilia and things that allow us all to remember it in the future.
No, okay. So the one, maybe not the last question, but we are getting. I think we should finishing. Yeah, we should landing now.
Absolutely.
So the Kickstarter story, because I was thinking about this. At the end of all, Amiga NG or Amiga, classic Amiga needs some new guys, new blood. And maybe the Kickstarter platform is the idea to put a little bit movement in our community to get the new guys or get new projects. I was thinking about this. Why, for example, we don't use the Kickstarter to found the new hardware?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, because I think, you know, when you talk about all these people that are going off and making hardware in back rooms and things by themselves, and doing some amazing work in that area, I think there's so much more scope. They could do so much more if they were able to get more funding from the community as a whole. And that's what I like about Kickstarter, is it's actually a very nice platform, because it basically says if enough people see value in what you're trying to do, then they'll give you the money and make it happen. You know, I think we had, what was it, Alistair Brimble or something, did a Kickstarter, right, to redo all of his amazing Amiga music in a modern platform and style. I was really surprised by the response to that, and the fact that it was successful and so quickly, which has really just highlighted the fact that you can have that success in the Amiga world as well. I mean, if we want to fund new hardware, then yeah, sure, why not? I mean, I can't see any reason why that wouldn't be successful, but there needs to be someone or group of people who are working on that can actually make it happen. Because I mean, how many historical hardware projects have failed in the Amiga
Yeah,
world?
yeah.
Seriously, there's been a lot, right? And it's happened because there hasn't been that clear direction or project drive, and money. Money's part of it, and but I think again, it's the case of too many people going off doing their own thing. I think it would be nice to get a group together that are thinking the same thing. You know, I would love to have a re-implementation of a PowerPC processor accelerator for my Amiga, classic Amiga. I'd love to have an FPGA re-implementation of a classic Amiga that can sit in my expansion slot on my X1000 and run all the old stuff without needing
Yeah,
emulation.
this will be nice, and
Wouldn't it be wonderful?
maybe maybe in future it will happen, because now with this accelerator for this for Amiga 600, this is the Furia or something like this.
Yeah.
This is the FPGA and the Apollo core and this stuff. The guys are getting they're doing something, and the result is not so bad, or even is quite impressive. So maybe in future we can expect something like this, or we can expect for example, in my opinion, we are lack of good or powerful turbo cards for classic Amiga, because the thanks God that Jens is doing something, but this is only 020 or 030 processor. It's
Yes,
not
I agree.
not so powerful.
Yeah, I would prefer to have the 060s and things as well. I'm sure everybody would. I mean, certainly, you know, I'm glad that Jens is there and he's still doing these runs of new hardware for classic Amiga, because it stops the prices of those accelerators going out of control. You know, because
Yeah.
you've seen it with PowerPC as well, and it's just gone crazy because of the rarity of them. And I think as he does these small runs for the benefit of the community, and obviously he's making some money from it too, but it's really helping us all to be able to improve our Amigas without having to spend huge dollars on it. I think that it's a good thing, and I hope we see more of it. If Kickstarter can help with that, then that's great too. I think we just need to make sure that people that are doing it have a clear vision for what they're trying to do, and are not, too much cowboys and not able to actually deliver the product, right? Because we need people to deliver, especially when you're putting money on the table like that. Because if they don't deliver, then they won't do it again, right? People won't commit money to make those developments happen, and it will just stop. So, if people are going to do it, they need to actually be able to deliver it.
Okay, so I think this Kickstarter, this is not so easy, but at the end of all, we can try to use this retro power, because now retro in Europe is very popular. I think in everywhere.
I think so.
Retro power to promote the NG systems, because this is our history, and most guys, I think they like Amiga, the old Amigas or something. The most of guys use it and have the good opinion about this, about the Super Frog, for example.
True, and quite a few of those classic Amiga games have been ported. I mean, I think I was playing Putty Squad on PS4 recently. Isn't that amazing to have have a game that is very much 2D and very much in the Amiga's history, available on a next gen platform in 2014, as it was when that was released. Quite amazing, and it just goes to show that it is possible to still make Amiga relevant today to a new audience, or to those who are nostalgic for the past of the Amiga, to actually come back into the community again. I hope that happens.
Okay, so I think we should finish really now.
Sure.
Because we can talk. I think you are a good talker here.
I told you.
And we can, yeah, we can
No problem.
we can put more hours in this recording. But I think this we more or less we talk about everything what we want.
Sure.
And now the last part it is the gratings.
Well, okay. I guess basically I'd like to greet all the people in the Amiga community who are involved in any capacity in it, whether they're developing, whether they're making hardware, or putting out software for people to enjoy. I'm grateful to everybody for doing that and making it possible for me to still enjoy Amigas in 2015. I think it's wonderful. And also a special mention to Trevor and Matt for their ongoing work to keep Amiga going through some quite difficult times. I think they've done some amazing work to get the X1000 to reality, to get the X5000 coming along, and to get people excited about the future for Amiga.
Very nice. Okay, I must say thank you for your time.
No problem.
And it was very nice for me. I learned a lot. I think that our episode will be very interesting for everybody. I hope. So and maybe in future we will record something more. We don't know. Maybe
who knows?
If you want. Yes. Thank you again, and bye. Have a nice evening for you. Yeah. Or night.
Yeah. No worries. You too.
Yeah.
Have a great
bye.
day.
Let us rise up tonight. Tonight. Let us rise up tonight. rise up tonight.
It was AMIcast, podcast for all Amiga users.